Hello, Internet. Let's talk about arrays. Arrays are like a list. Instead of having just one variable, we can have a whole bunch of items stored neatly into a single array. It's like having a collection of magical artifacts all lined up in a row, ready for you to use to explore. We have our HTML already set up. I already have the script tag already placed in. And now I'm going to open up the JS folder that I've created and opened up the JS array file that I have created. And as you can see, it is a blank file. The thing about JavaScript arrays is that you can have different values inside of the array, such things as strings and numbers or even hexadecimal. JavaScript allows you to be able to dynamically place these objects within it. Unlike C++ and C#, which are very strict, where you have a type and you have to put those types within that array. JavaScript can be a bit forgiving unless you use strict. In order to assign an array, there are a few ways of doing it. Right now, we can do it the old-fashioned way, is to create the variable. I'm just going to call it R and equal it into 2 square brackets. And this basically initializes the array as an empty array that you can use down the line to pass data into. Or if you have values that you want to initialize in it, like you can say with the first one, you would place hello, and then you can have different ones by adding in a comma, and you can add in a 2 or whatever else you want after that. It could be a hexadecimal or anything of that nature. I'm just going to say world at this point. But be careful. Just like rummaging through a messy closet, finding what you need in an array can sometimes be like searching for a needle in a haystack. That's why it's important to keep our arrays organized and tidy. No one likes a chaotic treasure. All right, so now that we've established that, I'm going to clear the array. I want to start off with an empty array so that I can show you things like putting data inside of the array when you're running your code later on, iterating through the array, and using different types of built-in functionality, functions. So the thing that I'm going to show you are ways of putting data inside of the array when you have code later on that you would want to use the array for. So where we're going through our code and we're writing different things and we are trying to establish the fact that we need a list of things. And you have to put in information at a certain index. One way of doing that is you can do array and then you can place what position in the array. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to put information inside of the array. There are different ways of putting information into the array. One way of doing it is through indexing. You can push them into the array, and there are a few ways of doing that. One way of doing that is using an index. You can just call the array by its name, then put square brackets at the end, and you can put the position of where you want to put the information. So I'm going to put down how are you for position 0. And to see if this is inside of the array, we're going to console.log the array, and what should appear inside of the array, the position at 0, how are you? If we open the developer console, we should be able to see that it will show this array that's just one item of how are you in position of 0. Now here, if we wanted to add more information, we could do it this way, and this way is fine, but there are better ways of doing it. So if I put position of 1 and then I put hello, are you fine inside of that position of 1, when I go to refresh it, it'll show that in this list there are now 2 sets of strings inside of this array. But there is a problem with doing it this way. Now, if per se we are going to go ahead and then put inside of there a position of 3, and then we put in the information of just kidding. Then what will happen is that we will end up with an empty in the position that was just before it because we're missing position 2. Now, if you're unsure about at this point, and what's going on is that because we set the position at 3, we are missing a position or data at this point. This can be a problem for you later on if you do it this way, and it is not very efficient. So we're going to erase this, and I'm going to show you how to push data into the array. There is a function that you can call. In order to use a built-in function in the array, you have to use dot after calling the array. So dot, whatever you want to use, I'm using push, and then I'm able to push in the data inside of my array. And push basically allows you to push or add information into it. So we can say hello there, and just like before, when we run it, we would have one item in the array. And the thing with this push is that you can continually push information into it, and it will be in sequential order in how it was pushed inside of it, where the newest item is in the back. And that is how you would push data into it, where the oldest item is in the front of the array and the newest item would always be at the end. So let's say, for instance, I'm just going to copy this and paste this and say I'm okay. And if I refresh this, then you'll see that the new one just appeared in the back behind of hello there. And this will be and know exactly what position it is when you're going to use it later. Now let's say you want to push information before 2 items or an item or however many items that you've placed. There is a way of actually placing data in where it pushes it into the front instead of at the end. And this is called array.unshift. You can say here in the front. And when you run this code, it will show that it says now it's here in the front. Unlike push will then put it at the back, but here it comes into the front, and you can put things from the front instead of at the end. There are more functions like these inside of this library for array, and you can go to w3schools.com. This is a great resource to actually get information about JavaScript, HTML, CSS, and other things. And it also explains to you what it does and shows you examples. And at the end, I will show you the site. And this will help you to be able to find out what it is that you want to use in your code. So how do you get this information out? Well, you can do it in many ways. Well, just like before, we could use the index of the array, and this index is basically the position in which the item is in. So if it is in the front right here, this is 0, then this one over here is 1, this one over here is 2. Let's call array, and we're going to say at position of 2. And what will happen is that when it shows on the other end, it will show up saying I am okay there. And this is one way of getting the information out. And there are other ways of doing it. Like if you want to be able to get the information, a function called pop, you can get this information and it will show you what it is. The thing with pop, this is not an issue. The thing with pop is that it will take out the item in the array in the process of calling it. So now, as you can see here, I am okay there is not inside of the array anymore, as I called it below. And this is okay if you need to be able to get the information out, and you don't have to really use the information if you want to use pop to take it out. And there is a way of also taking out the information from the front instead of the back, and that is called unshift. Unshift. And if you use unshift, it will then, instead of taking out from the back, it'll take it out from the beginning, which is 0, and have this be, at the end instead. Or you can use both if you need to, but you have to think about how you're going to use these function calls. Now, one of the next ways of getting data is using the at function, which is in the newer versions of JavaScript. So the at function, it's new, and what it would do is that it would be able to get the position in which you call the index at. As you saw, the VS Code did not show at in there, and you would be able to find this information over at W3 Schools. And the thing is that because it's newer, it might not be supported by older browsers, but if you were to use it, it's one way of getting data from which you have created. The conventional way of getting data is indexing, and with indexing, you basically do this like I showed you before, and you'd be able to get the information that way. Updating the value of the item in the array is as simple as using an equal sign. So let's say, for instance, we want to call the array at position 2, and then we want to change what's inside of it. You can do that by just adding in the equal sign and then changing the value to whatever you want, and then you can then call this and be able to see it, and it'll show you what is at that position. And as you can see over here at the position of 2, it has this information now. In order to effectively manipulate data, you'd have to use something called a loop. There are different types of loop. I will put a video for loops later. Right now, I need to show you how this is done. And the basic way of doing this is to create something called a for loop. And to create this for loop, you'd have to type the word for, and you can set an iterator. I call it I. And what iterator is basically a value that has a number, and the number basically moves up or down depending on if you go plus plus or minus minus, or set a variable to go up or down based off of that. So we're going to set this variable to 0. Then we're going to say I is less than the length of the array, and then afterwards we will then say I plus plus, and this is the iteration part that allows you to iterate through the array. And you put curly brackets at the end, and if you do console.log and then you call the array and then you set I inside of the index of the array, then when you run it, you should see that it all prints out right here. In a nutshell, that is arrays, and you can look up different functions that make it more effective to use an array and manipulate the data in an array without having to use a for loop. There are functions that actually do that for you. And you would have to understand how to use callbacks and things like that, and lambda expressions in order to actually use. We're looking at W3 Schools. You would be able to come here, and when you come here, you would see that it has a search bar, and you would type up JavaScript. And it's not just JavaScript, it's a whole bunch of different things that W3 Schools actually shows you on what to use. And in here, you can go through as much things that you want, including the newest versions and standards of JavaScript inside of here. And If you just want a particular thing, you can just type in what you're looking for. You will be able to go through them and see exactly how to use them. Thank you for watching my video and have an awesome, great adventure.